Hey, this is a Matt Allen fight of the night. We got the Great White Alex Morono, and hey, fight week is now. Shark Week was a while ago, but we get a Great White sighting in Las Vegas. And I mean, hey, he's taking on Skeletor, Rhys McKee, and listen, I know a lot of people are going to drop down in the comments. You're going to be all over Rhys McKee, how his debut went. Let me get this out of the way now. It went bad. It went historically bad. And Khamzat Chimaev built his name off of poor old Rhys McKee coming in on short notice. There was that weird exchange on social media where Graham Boylan, who runs Cage Warriors, but is also Rhys McKee's manager, goes on and then films the fact that he's like, hey, I got you a fight. It's Khamzat Chimaev. You're in the UFC. Bye. And that's kind of how it happened in a nutshell. But Rhys McKee, I mean, his record at 10-3 is very, very good. He's a two-time BAMMA lightweight champ. He recently competed with Cage Warriors as well. And there's a lot of things to like. I mean, out of all of his wins, they're all finished wins. He has plenty of submissions. Coming into the UFC, had wins over Jefferson George, Perry Goodwin, and Hakan Foss on that three-fight win streak. And I look at the losses, and they're names that you recognize. Tim Barnett, Terry Brazier from the regional scene. Terry Brazier now with Bellator, former two-division BAMMA champ, and again, Chimaev. So Rhys McKee, his bread and butter being the jiu-jitsu, training out of a really good gym, Next Generation Northern Ireland with Norman Park. I mean, KSW fans, they love Norman Park. Mateus Gamrot doesn't love Norman Park. But in this one, Alex Morono, I have it listed in the graphic there, training out of Gracie Baja Woodlands. We've seen him kind of cross-train at some different gyms in Texas. Fortis MMA being one of them. He trained there to get ready for his fight against Max Griffin. Holy smokes. What a fight against Max Griffin. Wow. I mean, back and forth. First round, second round, Morono rocks him. Third round, Max Griffin comes back. Alex Morono is one of those guys that I was never sold on him. I'll be honest. From personal opinion, I was like, hey, it's an Alex Morono
I can go
fight.
buy gas from a guy right now who looks just like him.
It's like, hey, he beat Zach Otto, he beat Song Kanan, he loses to Jordan Meehan. All right, it is what it is. But in those three fights, I really got a good level of, all right, Max Griffin, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has that in his back pocket. We see it. He has good wrestling. He's a Taekwondo black belt. Everything's kind of started to come together a little bit more for Alex Morono. Now, you could counter that and say, well, he got knocked out by Khaos Williams, who's now in this weekend's co-main event.
It's gonna happen.
You wouldn't be wrong. That much is true. But with Alex Morono, I do like the level of competition that he's fought on the regional scene, coming into the UFC, wins over Derek Krantz, then he beats Kyle Noak, then he beats a guy that Matt's really high on.
I was.
And James Moons Tasseri. And I look at the fights that he's had. He's lost some fights that he probably shouldn't have lost. Kaita Nakamura, Jordan Meehan, no longer in the UFC. But I do like Alex Morono in the fact that he is a fun fighter to watch. That much is true.
He 100% is. And Alex Morono's style does remind me a lot of Jordan Meehan. Because Alex Morono, what is he good at? Kind of everything. He doesn't do anything crazy. He's not going to go out there and throw a bunch of wheel kicks. No, he's going to go out there. He's good at wrestling. He's good at jiu-jitsu. He's good at striking. Now, I'd say the first half of his UFC career, we saw a lot more of the grappling side of Alex Morono, who was going out there much more takedown heavy. And you could tell that there was just sort of a lack of confidence in his own striking. But I would say ever since after that Jordan Meehan fight, starting the Kanan Song fight, going into the Zach Otto Max Griffin, he just seems like he has a much higher level of comfort, at least with his own striking. Because when you see him really let his hands go, really let his combinations go, you're like, wow, Alex Morono, like he's got legit kickboxing. But you look at some of his fights and the volume's not really there, and he doesn't really hit with the... not the force you think he's able to, but you see him land these big shots and you're like, wow, his opponent's not really moving by them. But again, it feels like Alex Morono's at least comfortable enough with himself in the UFC, and it took a little while for that to happen. That could be octagon jitters, that could just be level of competition, but I do think that three-fight win streak can be put up against anything Rhys McKee's done, and it really is comparable. Say what you want about Max Griffin, he almost severed a guy's ear last night, so that puts you in pretty high standing in my book. I do like the side of Alex Morono. It got him caught in his last fight against Khaos Williams because he is a guy who will go out there and he is more likely to strike than he used to be. This matchup is phenomenal, though, and it really does tell you how high the UFC must be on a guy like Rhys McKee because, yes, they fed him to Khamzat in his first fight. That's about the meanest thing you could do to a person. Hey, you have to fight Chimaev on a week's notice. But they're giving him Alex Morono, who's not a scrub by any means, who I would say is on that cusp of, like, the top 25 in the welterweight division. He's not, like, one win away from being ranked, but I would say he's much more competitive than just your standard, 2-3 fight UFC welterweight. Rhys McKee cannot get taken down in this fight. I know he's got a phenomenal ground game, but the biggest weakness of his career, and really as a guy who stands about 6'1" and weighs less than Rhys McKee, tall and thin, easy to get taken down. And we saw that in the Chimaev fight. But that's not going to be the story of this fight. I really do hope people can kind of kick the stigma of that performance away from Rhys McKee because, listen, Chimaev's, 3 fights in the UFC, and he's fighting the second-ranked welterweight in his next fight. He's one of those anomaly talents that we don't see very often. If Rhys McKee was matched up against really any other welterweight in his UFC debut, we would have seen a lot more from him, and I'm sure people would be a lot higher on him, but I think stylistically this is a really fun matchup because we are going to get a much more striking-oriented fight out of both these guys because they're both willing to play that game.
There's one fight on Alex Morono's record that reminds me a little bit of a Rhys McKee. There's one fight on Rhys McKee's fight that reminds me of an Alex Morono fight. For McKee, it's the fight that he had against Perry Goodwin. And if you've ever watched Cage Warriors, Perry Goodwin's one of my guys. It's weird, but you have to watch a Perry Goodwin fight. And I know his record isn't great if you just look at that number on the paper, but he's fought a really good level of competition. He knocked out Alexander Jakobsen with the crazy hooks that he has, and that's the thing.
Whack.
He's willing to strike. He's willing to push a pace. He stands heavy on his lead leg, and he's there to Julian Lane a fight. He just wants to bang. And I look at Rhys McKee, and he withstood that. He was able to get a nice win in that fight and really fought his fight. 3rd round guillotine choke. He beat Haken Foss. That's a big win, too. Haken Foss wasn't going to wow you off the page at 9-7, but he took on a decent level of competition on the European scene. For Alex Morono, and this one's a little bit of a non-comparable, but it's a fight against Josh Berkman. And I know it's sandwiched between losses to Jordan Meehan, frustrating fighter. Kaita Nakamura, very frustrating fighter.
Josh Berkman, 73 years old. But
that's where I was going with it. Kaita Nakamura, very diverse skill set. For Josh Berkman, long in the tooth. Very, very long in the tooth. Even 2 years ago. But that's one of those wins where you go, hey, long guy, big beard. But a good win for Alex Morono to get, especially to build confidence in the fact that his jiu-jitsu's there, and now his striking's come along. This should be an interesting fight because there's definitely a path of victory for both guys. Rhys McKee, if he can weather a storm and put it on Morono, especially in round 2 on, I think that's a perfect way for Rhys McKee to get a win because we've seen it. Alex Morono in the fight against Max Griffin, that second round, that was a 10-8. He poured it on, he had Max Griffin hurt. What did Max Griffin do in that 3rd round? We just poured it on Alex Morono, and Morono had a hard time with that pressure there.
He really did. Now, I don't know if we're going to see that same version of Morono, and this is why. I think Rhys McKee, the most important part of this fight is the first takedown attempt. If he can stuff that first takedown, it's going to tell Alex Morono, listen, I'm not that guy from BAMMA who used to get taken down a lot. Because Rhys McKee doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. What are you going to do? Say his jiu-jitsu's bad? It's not. His striking's really good too. And he does have this really long, kind of unique style that only people built like him can have. It's that, kind of Neil Magny-esque version of striking where he's going to have that volume, but I would say Rhys McKee is better at putting pop behind his shots. If Rhys McKee does start to get you with a volume, he'll start to kind of go into his power mode where he sits back on his shots, and he can really hurt you, but if he can at least defend that first takedown, maybe first 2 takedowns, and force Alex Morono to strike with him, I do think this is going to be an absolutely wild fight, because Alex Morono, he can go out there and take the boring route. If he gets that first takedown, we're probably just going to see a lot of Alex Morono in top control on Rhys McKee. But if Rhys McKee can start defending them, really force this into a striking battle, and then look for his own takedowns, I think this could be a phenomenal fight.
Now, Matt, if we have a look at the odds on this one, we were a bit surprised before we started, and a little bit of inside baseball. We don't normally look at the odds before we start. We just kind of click on it and go, and it's as big of a surprise to us as it is to you. I look at this, Alex Morono opened a big favorite.
He did.
I was actually surprised by that. Opened a minus 300 favorite. He's now a minus 190. A lot of money coming in on Rhys McKee. He opened a plus 250. He's now at a plus 158 over on Best Fight Odds. In terms of the overall predictions over on Tapology, 387 votes, so a limited sample size. 68% have Morono. 81% saying he's going to get the win by decision. So the fan vote is going the way of Morono, the safe route, the decision route. The odds, though, are starting to shift in on Northern Ireland's Rhys McKee. Is a win going to go back to the United Kingdom in this one?
I thought it was, and then I really started thinking about the fight. I started watching a lot of Alex Morono tape. Rhys McKee might be able to beat Alex Morono if all he does is strike. Alex Morono is really good at wrestling and grappling, though, and it's nothing against Rhys McKee, but Rhys McKee, he lacks the transitional skill in between his jiu-jitsu and his striking, and this is a thing that a lot of people in the UFC struggle with, but they've at least developed to the certain point where they found different weapons to combat their weakness. Rhys McKee, I think, has a higher ceiling than Alex Morono. If you give me the best version that Rhys McKee can possibly be versus the best version that Alex Morono could possibly be, Rhys McKee's probably going to win that fight. That's not what we're getting right now. Alex Morono is pretty much he's in his final form. He's not going to get that much better. He's just kind of good at everything. Like I was saying to Craig, he's like 6 out of 10 at everything. His jiu-jitsu's probably like an 8. He's just kind of good no matter where the fight goes. He can get it done at. Where Rhys McKee, It's like a 9 in striking, a 9 in jiu-jitsu, and then his wrestling's like a 1. Like, he really, really misses out on that one aspect. So Alex Morono, if he's having success on the ground, can decide, oh, I'm just going to take the fight to the ground. If he's having success on the feet, he can just decide, oh, I'm going to keep the fight standing. And the fact that he has such that, really an essential component that Rhys McKee lacks, I've got to pick Alex Morono in this fight.
And I mean, I agree with you, Matt. We haven't really agreed a whole lot so far on this card. But yeah, with Alex Morono, he's just a tricky fighter to try and beat. Now, of course, some people have Kaita Nakamura, a very diverse skill set. We're talking about Khaos Williams in the last fight. To use a possibly trademark phrase from Robin Black, fellow Canadian, so maybe I have his blessing, but Bink, he got him in that one. I mean, I look at this fight as Alex Morono, more well-rounded fighter, but if Rhys McKee's going to win, you have to remember, really good striking, very good jiu-jitsu, and maybe he tosses a straight shot up when Morono goes for a takedown attempt, but if he gets on his back, you saw it in the Chimaev fight. Now, that's an outlier because Chimaev's booked to fight a top 5 fighter, a top 3 fighter in Leon Edwards. I don't care about the UFC.
You might have heard of him.
You might have. Fabian has. I look at this fight as, is this the opportunity for McKee to really get back on the horse? Or is he really going to have to try and find himself if he loses? He's only 25 years old. Again, I think final form and final stage is way up there. I just have Alex Morono in this one. Much more diverse, more well-rounded, and again, he can really stymie on the feet, but again, if he starts to wrestle, you got to watch out. So, in this fight, Matt, we both have Alex Morono to pick up the win. I'm really looking forward to it. You have it as your possible fight 100%. Of the night. We got a great card coming up this weekend, headlined by Islam Makhachev taking on Rafael dos Anjos. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.